The World Food Programme and the global food crisis is a big theme here in Davos in 2013. To talk more about that, I've got a special guest. Ann Tutwiler is United Nations Special Representative here in the World Economic Forum and also part of the Food Agricultural Organization. And great to have you with us.
Thank you very much.
Let me begin with the global food crisis, because alarms were raised in 2012 saying there's an impending and a looming food crisis which seems to have been averted. Is that a short-term aversion, or do you feel that we've kind of just getting a little break and things are building up to a new food crisis?
Well, first of all, we weren't raising alarm bells in 2012 of a new food crisis, because we felt like the situation was quite different than what we saw in 2008, because the different commodities were affected last year. What is important, though, to remember is that in 2008, part of the crisis was due to how governments responded to the situation. So one of the strong messages we were giving in 2012 and again in 2013 is that how governments respond and how the private sector responds really determines whether a price situation becomes a crisis or not.
So you feel the government's responding in the correct way? Is the manner correct in terms of methodology and thought process?
I think what we are hoping to see is that countries avoid some of the export measures that they put in place in 2008, which had the effect of increasing the rice prices, which were the problem at the time. So we feel like governments have gotten that message, and we at FAO are trying to help them look at other ways they can address concerns about higher food prices without resorting to these kinds of export measures.
But you might not have a huge full-blown out food crisis as yet. But the problem is that the seeds of an impending food crisis are being sown every single day, because things are changing in the world. People are talking about population patterns changing. People are talking about more meat consumption. People, getting better in terms of economies and therefore consuming higher end products, needing more grains for that, and then farming patterns and changing on that front. So how would you propose a long-term sustainable solution?
Well, I think there's a couple of answers. Many of the trends you have mentioned, of course, are not reversible, so the agriculture system has to rise to that challenge. But if you look at the world food situation, first of all, about 30%, 40% of the harvest across the world is lost, either to losses post-harvest or during our consumption in our own homes. So there's a big amount of food that we produce, but is lost. Secondly, if you look at the yields in many developing countries, they are far below what would actually be achievable in those countries. So one of the most important things we can do is help farmers in developing countries to reach higher yields, because that is really the only solution over the long term to the challenges we face, as you say, with rising population and rising demand for more protein.
For India in particular, what is the FAO and United Nations doing to help farmers?
Well, I think there are a couple of things that need to be done. One is that India is beginning to target its interventions on the poorest people, and I think that's something that, as India progresses and has the technology to be able to target the interventions rather than providing broad-based solutions, target the interventions to the most needy people. And in particular, we just came from an event focusing on malnutrition, and I think India has made some progress in that regard, but still has very high rates of malnutrition given its economic power.
Let me just get a broader perspective in terms of the rest of the world. How does India compare in terms of the food and agricultural situation?
I think India has a lot of potential to increase its production, and as I said earlier, the rates of malnutrition in India are higher than what you would expect given the economic growth that's been happening in India. So I think that's an area, if I would make a recommendation, that the government really needs to focus on improving nutrition, particularly in children, because it's a long-term investment.
Ann Tutwiler, it's a noble cause, and thank you so much for speaking with NDTV.
Very much.
Thanks for your work in India.
Thanks.
India's #1 news app. Just got even better. Download NDTV's new app. Fully optimized for retina display. Full screen view. Faster response time. And Sudoku. NDTV's new iPad app. Download now.